Easy people, welcome back. You're going to want to stay on to the end of this one because I'm going to change the way you perceive the world and the way you think about certain subjects on a personal level and a spiritual level. Like the title suggests, you have been conditioned to work. I've been conditioned to work. Everybody you know has been conditioned and programmed to work hard. Now, there are a multitude of reasons for this, and the topic itself is diverse, and I could make videos for hours. When you're 11, 10 in school, all of a sudden the world starts putting pressure on you. What are you going to do when you grow up? Most people want to be vets, doctors, marine biologists, dolphin trainers. But the harsh reality is that most of us never actually achieve what it is that we want to achieve from a working perspective. We get lost along the way and we end up settling because we become victims of circumstances. We find ourselves in positions where we need to keep working to earn more money, and then we need more money to buy more stuff that we don't need. We've all heard of this. But it might not be something that you've thought of. I watched a video about 5 years ago, and it was on a completely different subject to this, but it was a round table, and one of the girls on it said, I still need to work. And it just hit me. It was like, well, give me a second. Wow. It's like we are all locked in this perpetual cycle, and it's the cycle of birth, work, and death. That's the harsh reality of life on earth, that something awaits all of us at the end of the line. There is no escaping that. We are eternal, infinite, energetic beings, and energy can't be destroyed. It can only be transferred. But notwithstanding that, there is a fate out there for all of us. And that's not a happy subject to talk about for a lot of people. In fact, most people are grossly uncomfortable with this topic. And that's okay. But the longer you put off this end game, this subject, the longer it is that it's going to take you to figure out what the meaning of your life is, what your purpose is, what your being on this earth is all about and what it's for. Now, you've been conditioned into thinking that you must work hard to give your life purpose, to give yourself meaning, to give your life meaning. And there are other things that we do in society, cultures all over the world, that we're programmed to do to give ourselves purpose, because we're human beings and we need goals. We need to have that sense of achievement and fulfillment. Your self-fulfillment can come from multiple different places. It doesn't have to come from work. So if you found yourself locked in this perpetual cycle of work, then the more you work, the more you're occupied, the harder you work, the less chance there is and the longer it's going to take you to discover who you are. It's exceptionally difficult to find spiritual enlightenment and spiritual enrichment whilst we're toiling away, because we toil for 40, 50 hours a week. We go home, we've got the chores to do, life goes on, and then we find ourselves, it's Monday morning again. Now, there's a link between absolutely everything. This subject about us being conditioned to do loads of different things that we don't actually want to do is a mixture of norms and values, and norms and values differ from country and culture to culture, and they differ from household to household. How one house lives is different to the house around the corner. You live different to your siblings. Our parents have a lot to answer for, because it becomes a cycle of conditioning. You've been conditioned by your parents and society. Your parents were conditioned by their parents and society. Their parents were conditioned by reality and by their parents. So the cycles continue. If you have a family, then you're probably going to condition your children too, because children end up thinking the same way as their parents, and they do that via nature nurture. If you're sitting around the dinner table talking about one subject, your kids will hear that subject and they'll absorb it. It will press on their subconscious, and then they'll start thinking about it, and then they'll start repeating it as they grow up. As human beings, we have this fear of not following the status quo. We desperately want to be liked and we desperately want to be popular and we want to fit in. Nobody likes not fitting in. We're talking about conditioning that is impressed on us in school, because we go to school and you don't actually have anything in common with anything that you're in school with. You just all happen to have been born at the same time in the same area. You get sent to the same school. And you desperately want to fit in because you're taken away from your household and you're put into the school environment where you have to fit in. And that feeling of abandonment and being different sticks with us throughout our entire life. It continues into this cycle of birth, work, death. What happens is people put off the subject and you find yourself in this cycle and we put it off, we don't think about it. But then it catches up with us when we get around the age of 50. And that's why many people have midlife crises, because they realize that life hasn't worked out the way that you'd been told it would. And it hasn't worked out the way that you'd hoped and dreamed that it would have done, because you haven't dreamed your dream properly and you haven't used your imagination. You haven't allowed your imagination to actually dictate your future, because our imagination is suppressed as well. And it's linked to spiritual suppression. Reality doesn't want you to know that your imagination creates the world around you. That's why you're encouraged to leave it in your childhood. You stop imagining as soon as you get to a certain age. We think about imagination and we think about it being Disney films and magic. And then as you get older, you have to become this adult, which is like somebody out of a cookie cutter, or it's like being a human being straight out of a production line. So how do we break this cycle? We're talking philosophically about spiritual subjects so that we can rediscover ourselves, our essence, our inner self, and our being. Many people, and this could be you, have become lost, and we're focusing on things that we don't need to be focusing on, when we should be focusing on ourselves. And once you've gone through this spiritual distillation process, you can see the world through different glasses, through different lenses, and it looks completely different once you've been through this phase. So this subject triggers a lot of people, because people start shouting, saying, well, I need money to do this and I need to buy this. So that is true. We're locked in this reality where we need to buy water. For a lot of people now, we're going to be moving into the winter and your house is going to get cold. You have to pay for natural gas. You have to pay for electricity. And if you don't pay for these things, then you're cold. But that doesn't mean that you need to work hard in order to have all of these things. We get too focused on working to achieve small-term goals. We don't see the bigger picture. There are various ways out of this, out of unplugging. It's not just unplugging from the work cycle that we've all found ourselves in, but it's unplugging from this matrix and from the reality which is being pressed on our conscious, which then becomes a product of our subconscious. That is how we get conditioned. Maybe you're a tradesperson. You're an electrician, a plumber, or a carpenter, or you have another set of skills. But instead of working for somebody else, where you have to be somewhere at a certain time and work certain hours, maybe you can be self-employed. The guy who lives across the street from me, actually, he's a carpenter and joiner, so he makes windows and cabinets. He's just gone it alone. He leaves his house at 6 o'clock in the morning and he gets back at about 6:30 in the afternoons. And he does that Monday to Friday. And the poor guy doesn't have any time to discover himself, to figure out what the meaning of life is and what the purpose of life is, because it's not what his current life setup isn't the meaning of life. He wasn't born and put here in his energetic form as this human being to be living this lifestyle where he's literally working 13 hours a day, or he's out of his house 13 hours a day. So he's taken the decision to go it alone. He's got his business cards printed out and he's building up a portfolio. Now he's going to be doing the exact same profession and skills, which he enjoys doing. He just doesn't enjoy them in his current setup, but he's going to be doing them on his own terms. People will be shouting now saying, well, hang on a second, you said you've been conditioned to work. Well, yeah, he has been conditioned and he's found himself in a nasty cycle like I've just described, but he's making that first step, that first change so that he can get his life back on track. He can rediscover himself. He can have more time to be himself, to do the things that he enjoys doing, go out cycling, walking out in nature, going out on the river on a kayak, cooking nice meals, things that he enjoys doing rather than just eating frozen food because he just doesn't have time, more time to walk his dog. And maybe everything I've just said is you. Maybe you can take one or two factors from what I've just said and implement that into your life. Maybe it is starting a business. Maybe it's being entrepreneurial. But again, we're conditioned to think that to start a business, you need hundreds of thousands of pounds, or it's going to cost you tens of thousands of dollars. But that's not the case. But then you've also been conditioned to think that if you are a business person or an entrepreneur, you need to be earning millions of pounds, because we see these tech startup people on the TV, these people who own all these huge mega conglomerate companies who want you working, by the way, because they don't want you to figure out the meaning of life and what the world is, that we put these people on a pedestal and then get locked in this cycle of thinking that this is what we need to achieve. But you can reevaluate your life. Your divine path has got you to where you are now. And you can change your future. You can use the now to change the future. What you're doing now doesn't mean that it has to be what you're doing next year. It starts with a change. Be the change. Take that first small step. And you can really change your life. The important thing to firstly accept and acknowledge is that we have all been conditioned and programmed to think a certain way. Realizing that is really difficult, and accepting it is even harder. And you can do experiments with friends and family and co-workers. You can ask them these philosophical questions like, what do you think the meaning of life is? Where do you think we come from? Where do you think we go? Where did the earth come from? It's a surefire way to watch people squirm, because they hate being asked that question, because a lot of people haven't even thought about it, because we're taught how to think. And without going too off topic, if you ask people, where did the world come from? Reality has served us up only two possible explanations for that. To talk about anything else starts making people sweat, and they get angry and they get triggered because they don't like that you've got alternate thoughts. You're watching this now because firstly, the algorithm has brought the video to you, and you're probably thinking of a way out of this matrix and this cycle that we're stuck in. And that might mean spiritual enlightenment. Maybe you have to do some work spiritually. I've been through this process and I'm still working on it, but we all have to go through the spiritual distillation phase so that we can get out of this phase of not knowing what it's all about, what you're here to achieve, because you have a divine purpose. You have a special purpose for why you're on earth now. In all of history, you're here now, and there's a reason for that. Wherever it is you are in the world, there's a reason why you're where you are. There's a reason why you were born into that country and into that way of life. Now, it can be difficult for us to know, but you have to know that there is a reason. And that can be difficult because it's not the status quo. People don't like talking about these subjects. There's no real scientist who's going to give you these answers. Each and every one of you is going to have a different interpretation due to your own perceived reality, because we all experience the world differently. So be the change. That's where this is going. Be the change. Once you can reevaluate what your desires are, your present circumstances will start shifting. And don't worry about what other people think. I've had this conversation with a friend, and it's like that glazed face that you get where people don't know what you're talking about, and they get angry. And he turned around and said, well, you have to work, otherwise you'd get bored. And I just had my head in my hands, like despair. So you're telling me the meaning of life is to work so that you don't get bored. Well, what are you going to do when you retire? Because that's all most people think about, retiring, which is a distant dream that a lot of us don't actually realize, because by the time you get to the age of 66, it is in Britain. I'm not sure. I think France might be like 65. The US is around the same. Australia, Canada, similar. You're probably going to be too sick and you're going to need to go to the doctor or the physician every couple of weeks. Just walk past your local doctor's surgery or your physician and see the old people coming in and out. It's like they're hooked on the place. So are they really enjoying their retirement? But this is a completely different subject now about why you've been conditioned to delay life, to postpone life. And I'll make another video about that because that's going to blow your mind when you think about that concept. So as always, I really hope that you've enjoyed. I'm glad that YouTube has brought this video to you and that I've taken the time to make the video. If I've connected with you or you think that my video might be helpful, and it doesn't have to be 100% completely helpful. It could just be that 5% of it was helpful, or one thing that I've said has made you think slightly differently. Well, then I'm happy with that, and that's a success. So please like and subscribe. And I will see you folks on the next one. Bye-bye.